Well, we appreciate you joining us today for another episode of Curiosity, Not Judgment. Welcome in. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So, I am going to preface this conversation by saying I got a very intriguing question from my dad by way of text this morning. And I've been thinking about it throughout the day. I actually ended up having a little conversation with ChatGPT about it because I wanted to see its response. And so the theme really is around deconstruction and where that falls in the spectrum of curiosity. And what I'm getting at, I think specifically for this conversation, is we always encourage good questions. We always encourage folks to think about what questions can they be inserting into the environment, into the community, into a relationship to better understand others or a situation for the process of relationship building. However, there can be a point at which you question and question and question and get stuck kind of in this deconstructive spiral where you don't really land anywhere, but it ends up becoming very destabilizing. And so I thought the prompt or the question that my dad posed to me this morning was something that was a great opportunity for us to explore a little more deeply. And so I will turn it over to you for any immediate feedback.
Well, when you were describing that, I was thinking of, each one of my kids and now my grandkids going through, their 2-year-old phase of why,
Mm,
why,
yeah,
why, right? And,
yeah.
and, and it's a beautiful, wonderful time of life, but it's not very useful as far as conversations go.
Mm,
No, they're learning and, et cetera. But, it doesn't make for the funnest conversations. But isn't that the issue with deconstruction? When does curiosity become destabilizing or put the other person on defensive
mm-hmm,
as to why are you questioning that? That's
mm-hmm,
something that I hold dear. It's
mm-hmm,
something that I have as part of my bedrock. It's
mm-hmm,
foundational to me. So if you're questioning it, should I be questioning it? And why are you questioning it?
mm-hmm,
And this seems like an assumption or a given to me. Why isn't it to you? I
mm-hmm.
can see where it could lead to different outcomes than you desire.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I had never heard that phrase used outside of the faith community. And I've heard it a lot within that faith conversation over the last decade. And it is described as somebody deconstructing. And that is specific to, well, the context in which I've heard it is people who have been brought up in a faith tradition and maybe were exposed to a series of beliefs or behaviors or protocols, whatever are part of that faith practice, and they're beginning to question the maybe the validity. They're maybe beginning to question why this group does what they do, and the questions of why continue to the point of them saying, maybe I don't believe this anymore. And so that's the context in which I have heard deconstruction. And then when I had this little back and forth with ChatGPT today, it was describing deconstruction in all kinds of settings, including the professional environment, where we as individuals in a setting would begin to question the assumptions and the givens that had been present up to date and begin to then kind of take a look at it from a systems level, de-engineer it maybe to say, okay, we need to go back to the beginning and understand the foundational elements. We need to destruct in order to make sure that we are on the right track moving forward.
Goodness, I just feel like that's been my whole life is I now feel like someone could label me as a deconstructionist based on what you just said because I'm always asking questions. I'll never forget joining, I did my 4 years in government and which, everybody who knows me as a serial entrepreneur is like, you're not going to last 3 weeks in
Mm,
that kind of environment. It's like, I had a blast, but I did a lot of deconstruction. I
mm-hmm,
said, why is that the way it is?
mm,
And or and I always felt like there was a lot of if you ask a question once and get a no, you're done.
mm,
Whereas I would say, well, wait a minute, if I want to do this, why can't I do that?
mm-hmm,
What's in the way of that, and how can we get to that? And or if that rule is in place, is it still applicable in the changed environment?
mm-hmm,
And I feel like now I've got a big label across my head, deconstructionist. As I can just imagine walking into an office now in my government days with people having that label already on my head.
Mm. Well, and so to that point, you would probably be viewed in a negative way, right? You are the destabilizing force
Exactly.
because you're asking all the questions. But I do find it very curious that we have this either positive or negative connotation of what deconstruction means. Maybe
Hmm.
some people find it liberating, other people find it destabilizing, but there doesn't seem to be, at least in my limited research today, doesn't seem to be a middle ground for like a perception around what deconstruction might mean or imply in a given context.
I think this is where it really becomes important for us to not go in with an agenda
Mm,
in a conversation or a meeting that's not flexible. In other words, if you see your line of questioning making people severely uncomfortable or
mm-hmm,
defensive, we should be sensitive enough to realize that that's going on,
mm-hmm,
read the room, and take a different tact. I think that there's ways to ask questions that can put people on the defensive. If you say, "Well, this is what we do," and you say, "Why? That sounds stupid,"
mm,
versus, "Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought you were going to
mm,
get to this outcome by that method. You know, can you help me with how that method leads to that outcome every time? And are there other ways that are possible,
mm-hmm,
or something along those lines?" And I'm messing this up a little bit, but I would imagine that if you come into a room and you step on all the sacred cows, which is
mm-hmm,
what it sounds like a deconstructionist kind of might be accused of doing,
mm-hmm.
then that's not necessarily the smartest way to do things.
Right. I think there is definitely tact and sensitivity that need to be applied to a situation. So if you're walking into a space where you feel like some of the tried and true methods or the norms themselves need to be questioned, how you ask really matters. And so it's not just about being curious, maybe because you're a little bit snarky and you're going to throw that question in there to unbalance people, but it's asking with the right heart and truly trying to get to the motivation behind something. And so tell me a little bit about the genesis of that idea, or when did the company start doing that? And is there a reason why we, you know, do this practice on a regular basis? Those kinds of things.
And context matters. I just remembered the story. I moved from California in a gifted program one time in fourth grade to Mississippi.
Mm,
And on the first day of my class, we often moved in the middle of the year. My dad was a Navy pilot. We moved every 6 months to a year and a half. And so here I am, new class, new environment, spelling bee, first day.
mm.
No problem for me. I was an avid reader. And so I got one wrong. And I had already figured out after moving around a lot that you don't just raise your hand and try to make the teacher look bad. But I knew I was right, so I went up. I went up afterwards, when everybody else went to recess, and said, "Hey, um, I I got this word right, and you marked it wrong." And she said, "No, this is wrong." And I said, "You said ire." And she said, "Yeah, I said ire, like the ire you brave."
Oh my goodness.
And I said, "No, I heard ire, like, somebody, you've raised someone's ire." And she says, "Oh, go back to your desk. You're fourth grade. You shouldn't even know that word."
Wow.
Now, I could have.
Mm,
Now, I'm in the wrong here. I'm the person who's not in the context.
mm,
I could have argued that. I could have said, "Hey, I'm right. You need
mm-hmm.
to do something about this." But then I thought, it's probably more important that I make friends and go out on the playground right now than it is to
To
fight
win a
this
fight.
battle.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to understand the context as to maybe I'm the one who doesn't
Mm,
understand. Maybe I'm the one who is looking at a situation thinking I know
mm-hmm.
what it is, and maybe it's not.
Yeah. I think a little bit about that generational component about the deconstruction process and the innocence of a 2 or 3 year old, right? Asking why.
Yes.
Maybe a teenager asking why from a very different perspective,
Yes.
right? And then maybe adult children asking their parents why And all of those whys have a different motivation
Mm,
behind them.
mm-hmm.
And so I think also making some allowances that as we grow and mature and need to understand and process the world in a way that makes sense to us, we have to have some grace for the questioners, but then I think the questioners also have to have grace for the ones to whom we're asking the why, because if they don't have a good reason, it can be very destabilizing for them as well.
And I can tell you this. I mean, as somebody who was constantly getting scolded by my teachers for not showing my work, sometimes I didn't want to hear why. It's like, look, I got this right. Let's move on.
Mm,
And or don't make me explain everything that I'm doing, because
mm-hmm,
sometimes, quite honestly, I may not understand completely myself.
mm-hmm,
And there are certain things that I'll speak for me, that I'm going to put a lot of thought into
mm-hmm,
before I do it, and some things that I really don't care.
mm-hmm,
But if you passionately care about that, you may need to know why
mm-hmm,
legitimately, or whatever, for whatever reason. You might be saying why, and it's like, I don't know. I just did it that way.
mm-hmm.
And you asking me why is a bit of an annoyance.
Yeah. And you just learned how to make sourdough bread.
That's right.
So you're having to ask lots of why questions about the whole
Yes.
process. And if the person that you're learning from is like, this is my recipe, you don't question it, it's solid gold, right? They might take a little offense with some of your
Yes.
whys. But if they understand, like, hey, I'm just really trying to understand so I can make this my own and have my own twist, and I've got to deal with elevation in baking and all of the things that might be a nuance into a recipe, then you preserve relationship. But I think it really takes some tenderness and awareness from both parties.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking about that whole parenting thing. I think you're right. I think that what we don't want to do is knock the why out of kids,
Mm,
right? We want them to stay curious, and so we need to, as much as our patience will allow,
mm-hmm,
to answer those to the best of our ability. And sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know why. You remember the old story of they're making the Christmas ham, and the mother she's teaching the daughter how to do it, and she gets the ham out, and she cuts off the ends of the ham and puts it in the pan and puts it in the oven. And the daughter goes, "Why do you cut the ends off the ham?" And the mother goes, well, I don't know. That's what my mother did. That's how I was
mm-hmm,
taught. So they called the mother. And the mother said, why do you cut the ends off the ham? And she goes, I don't know. It's the way my mother got. Grandma's still alive. Great grandma is still alive. They call great grandma. Grandma, why did you cut the ends off the ham? She goes, so it would fit in the pan.
mm,
So sometimes things just get passed down
yeah,
from generation to generation organizationally, from
mm-hmm,
era to era. That era might be as little as a month, might be as long as a couple of years.
mm-hmm,
And things just get passed down because, you know what? It's not important enough to try to question it. It just is what it is.
mm. That's a really interesting example, which I appreciate that you brought forward, because I could see us doing that in a family setting, in a business setting. You know, when you come in the house, you do X, or when you interact with neighbors or guests, you do X. And like, well, why? That feels uncomfortable or weird, or I don't understand it. And maybe the person that has that rule doesn't understand it either, but it's just been passed down. And maybe it's something as practical as, well, it's because we had a small pan, or because our house couldn't accommodate it, or whatever it was, but not really thinking through the why to the established practice.
That's right. We just had a house guest this week. My son called and said, hey, I've got this videographer coming into town to do some work with one of my folks, and he was going to stay with her, and but her husband had pink eyes, so
Hmm.
could he stay with you? And I said, of
The pink
course.
eye guy stayed over here.
No, no, no.
Oh, I was like,
The
oh, great.
pink eye guy was over there. The videographer stayed with us, and he came in the house, and he instantly took off his shoes. And I said, "Oh, we don't have to. You don't have to take your shoes off here." He goes, "Well, you guys aren't wearing shoes." I, well, I hate shoes, but you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
take off your shoes. He goes, "I just usually do it because some people do, some people don't, and
Mm-hmm.
so I just do." And some people have that practice, some
Mm-hmm.
people don't, right? And some people change that practice.
Yes.
I went to a friend's house, a mutual friend that you and I both
Mm-hmm.
know, and I took off my shoes. He goes, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. The kids are walking around." It's like, you did it because the kids are crawling.
Oh,
And people, I never
I
thought
wouldn't have
about
thought of
why.
that either.
Now I know some cultures
Yeah.
it's important to take your shoes off. So I think that, look, if it's not a pain, I'm going to do it
Mm,
regardless. Because take off my shoes, great,
yeah.
no problem. Tell me to take off my shoes. But I think people do things for different reasons. Sometimes known, sometimes unknown,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes culturally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're in a situation where you've already built a trusting
Mm,
relationship, a friendly relationship, and people know that you're asking out of pure curiosity, which might be the key to the curious
mm-hmm.
question,
Mm-hmm.
then, I think it's going to be taken as such. If it's like, why do you do that?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
it's not.
Right. Yeah. Tone matters.
Tone
Motivation
matters.
matters for sure. But I am thinking back to the person on the receiving end of the question, and it is sometimes hard not to be offended
Sure.
when it's tradition that's long held, whether family, business, or faith. To feel like somebody is upsetting the apple cart is really problematic. And so, how you respond in that moment is critical because
Mhm.
that could be a make or break moment for a relationship.
That's right. That's right. It could be. And again, this is where I go back to staying curious while you're in the conversation. If
Yep.
somebody's getting visibly upset about your line of questioning, well then, time to change tactics. I mean, if you
Mm,
want to preserve the relationship, if you want to make more deposits than withdrawals, as
hmm.
Stephen Covey used to say, well then it's important that you monitor the situation real time
Mm,
and say, how's this going? Am I getting the information I need? Is the other person staying happy, joyous, and free? Or are they getting upset? And if they're getting upset,
hmm.
it's time to do it another time. Maybe they're having a bad day.
Yep.
Maybe they're going through a lot, right? We never know what people are going through. And, sometimes the environment is wrong, the timing is wrong, the questions are wrong. And I think having the ability to be flexible in that is just as important as the questions themselves.
Sure. And I think even asking, is this the person that I need to be having the conversation with? Because if
Absolutely.
you're meeting with that resistance, but you need your questions answered, is there someone else that you can approach?
Yeah. And sometimes people might just say, well, because that's what they tell us to do.
Mm,
And then it's like, okay, well, that's definitely the wrong person
hmm.
because then they've been told by someone to
Right.
do it that way. You need to go to the source. And I think that's a really good one too to think through is this the right person? Is this the source?
Hmm. Is it the
Is
source?
is
Yeah.
this the source of the decision or the process
Hmm.
or the thing that you're having legitimate questions about?
Hmm. So, in our remaining time, I want to talk about that deconstruction leading to destabilization, and then what do you do to pick up the pieces?
Hmm.
Because I think this is a very potential byproduct with going through the motions or going down that path of asking all of the questions and then finding out your whys don't line up with what you believed previously. So, what do we do at that point when we've become destabilized and we think, okay, I don't know that I was ready to uncover the answer that I did uncover?
Hmm. Yeah, and you can take that from both sides, right?
Yep.
Because if you're the one being questioned, and it seems like no matter what you say, the person is just not tracking or not following, or is saying, "Well, I don't like that answer."
Mm-hmm.
Well, my why is my why,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you can you can present me with different data if I'm getting the data wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's more of a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's more of an emotional thing, or if it's something out of fear, well, you got to be careful with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're on the questioning side, then it's more of the how can I ask this question in a way that doesn't feel like them
Mm-hmm.
to be deconstruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think then as you are having that analysis of self and others in this process, let's say you are the questioner and you've gotten to the bottom and you believe that a value, a belief system, or a practice is in error.
Mm-hmm.
If the other person is not ready to receive it, are you the one that has to drive that point home?
No.
Well, I mean, you say that very casually and easily, but I think sometimes we get fired up about new knowledge, like, you're wrong, let me show you why. And in that zeal, there's a definite possibility of compromising relationship.
Well, you're exactly right, and I think that's the right way to say it. Is how important is the relationship to preserve, and how important is your point?
Yeah.
If somebody's gonna, with bad information, is gonna go off and put themselves or somebody else in danger, well, that's a
Different
no-brainer.
scenario. Yeah.
But if it's somebody who's just having a difference of opinion of you, and it's something that they've held tightly for all their lives, do you want to beat your head against that wall? Do you want to, or do you want to preserve the relationship? Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy?
Mm. Well, I mean, I think to the pseudo Thanksgiving arguments and conversations that get referred to in lots of settings about, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion.
Religion.
Those are the things that I feel like people get really passionate about, and they want somebody to come to their side,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want others to believe what they believe. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as we're entertaining this conversation around asking good questions, being aware and responsive to the posture of the person that is being asked, how do we navigate those things? Because sometimes they're really tricky and they're really big topics.
I went into a pub one day for a sandwich. I was giving an Intel executive a castle tour. So when I was starting up the plant in outside of Dublin in Leixlip, Ireland, Fab 10 for Intel, these vice presidents would come and check up on me, and they would spend a few minutes and see how things were going, which was the answer was well. And so they'd say, "So, what do you do around here?" And I said, "How about we go see a couple of castles?" "Yes, please."
Mm.
So, and I think sometimes that was what they were there for. So anyway, we would go on this little castle tour, and I'd take them down the east coast of Ireland, and we would go to some of the really cool places there. Anyway, we stopped in for lunch one day, and I'm sitting next to this man who is in his three-piece, vested suit, and he's there for his toasty and his first pint of the day. And and everybody in a pub, once you walk in, is friendly and they're going to talk. So I sit down, I'm talking to him, and he says, your man, and it was the midterms during the Clinton administration.
Okay.
Your man Clinton, he took a bit of a beating yesterday. And I said, yeah, isn't that great? Just to be funny. And he goes, okay, we'll be talking about the weather now. And it was just that. We're
Wow.
going to move on, and we had a lovely conversation. Not about Clinton,
Yeah,
not about the politics of the situation,
that's funny.
but just we were going to have a conversation about something else now.
Mm.
And it was not uncomfortable. It wasn't awkward. It was just, we're going to be talking about something else now.
And he chose not to be offended and turns back to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And he didn't need to be, and he didn't want to be. And he wanted to have a conversation, just not about that now.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing, we can, I think that's the other part. Can we choose to be offended or choose to not be offended?
I believe the answer is yes.
Well, so I think we could, so both the questioner and the questionee
Mm-hmm.
have a responsibility in any relationship, in any discussion. And by the way, those can flip.
Yes, they can.
And so the questioner has a responsibility not to intentionally deconstruct something that's deeply held by this person, at least not all at once and abruptly, and can ask curious questions if there's that trust relationship, and vice versa. The person can say, I think if you're going around second guessing everybody's motivations, that's a tough life also.
Sure.
If you just say, wow, this person's an intelligent person, they're purely curious about how I came to my conclusions, I'm going to tell them what I know and what I've thought about to this point about this subject. Why not? Right? Now, look, we're all not in the mood to do that at all times.
Sure.
But I think that would be the right conversation to have, right?
Yeah.
If we could.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to kind of close it up and make that internal questioning of ourselves, our attitudes, and our motivations. So, with that, we will sign off for today and wish you a lovely week. And we will see you again right back here.
Take care.
Presumably right back here.
Right back here.
Could be somewhere else.
Could be somewhere else. Anywhere else. Take care.